Welcome to my channel, where stories of love, defiance, and destiny collide among the stars. This tale begins far from Earth, in a galaxy ruled by ancient bloodlines and alien empires. When the Princess of Veilora chose a human to continue her royal lineage, she believed he would obey her every command. But what she didn't expect was that the human she bought would change her world, and her heart, forever. Part 1 begins in the shimmering city of Vereen, where the twin suns bathed silver towers in soft blue light. Princess Lyriel stood before a crowd of her court, her beauty ethereal, emerald skin, golden eyes, and long tendrils of hair that shimmered like liquid fire. Yet beneath her royal calm was desperation. Her empire demanded a pure heir, but her bloodline was dying. Then her scientists presented a discovery, a human male whose DNA matched the royal patterns. She ordered his capture, confident that a primitive creature from Earth would kneel before her. But when they brought him before her throne, bound and silent, his eyes met hers with a quiet strength that made her pulse quicken. His name was Ryan Hale, and from that moment nothing in her empire would remain the same. Part 2 unfolds in the princess's private chambers. Ryan was not what she expected, tall, scarred, with calm gray eyes that seemed to see through her arrogance. He didn't beg, didn't tremble, and when she told him he now served her purpose, he only said one word. No, the word echoed through the chamber like thunder. No one had ever refused her. She felt fury rise, but beneath it, something far more dangerous: curiosity. She ordered him kept in her quarters, not in the dungeons. That night she couldn't sleep. She found herself standing by the observation window, staring at Earth in the distance. She wondered what kind of world created men who could defy a queen without fear. Part 3 deepens the bond and the tension. Over the next days, Lyriel tried to bend him with charm, threats, even luxury. She brought him silks, food, and music from his homeworld. But Ryan stayed silent, unbroken. Then one night, as she approached him, he said softly, "You can command my body, princess, but not my soul." The words unsettled her more than any act of rebellion. She realized her empire had never taught her what it meant to be seen as more than a title. That night, she dismissed her guards and spoke to him as Lyriel, not as the princess. He listened, and for the first time in her long life, someone spoke to her. Not out of fear, but honesty. In the stillness of the night, two beings from different worlds began to understand each other's loneliness. Part 4 brings intimacy and revelation. One evening, when the palace lights dimmed and the air was warm with the scent of alien flowers, Lyriel approached Ryan again. This time, there were no commands, no guards, only the trembling of her hands as she touched his cheek. "You hate me," she whispered. "No," he replied softly. "I pity you." His voice broke through her defenses. She confessed that she was dying slowly from a genetic curse, her empire ready to replace her if she could not bear an heir. Ryan held her gaze and said, "You don't need a slave to save you. You need someone who chooses you." Her breath caught, and for the first time, the princess felt small, human even, in the presence of someone who refused to worship her. Part 5 is where passion meets rebellion. The council discovered her secret, an alien princess sharing her chamber with a human. They demanded Ryan's execution. She stood before them, her voice trembling with emotion. "If he dies, I will abdicate." The council chamber erupted, but she didn't care. That night, in the quiet before dawn, she went to Ryan's cell, unlocked his chains, and whispered, "Run." But he refused to leave her. Instead, he took her hand and said, "If I run with you." The kiss that followed was not one of royalty or conquest. It was raw, defiant, and alive with everything their worlds had forbidden. Part 6 brings the storm and the calm that follows. Together they fled into the outer systems, hunted by warships and betrayal. In the chaos of escape, Ryan shielded her from a blast that would have killed her. When she cradled him, tears glowing like stars fell on his face. "You were never mine to own," she whispered, "but my heart was always yours." They disappeared beyond the edge of known space, where rumors grew that the lost princess and her human lover founded a new world, a place where love was not about power or blood, but choice. And somewhere in the dark, two hearts beat together, defying empires. If you enjoyed the story of love, defiance, and destiny, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of forbidden romance and powerful emotion. See you in the next story, right here on my channel. The air in the royal chamber felt different that night, heavy with tension and the quiet hum of starlight filtering through crystal walls. Princess Lyriel had dismissed her attendants, wanting to face the strange man from Earth alone. He stood at the center of the room, wrists still bound by faint energy cuffs that glowed pale blue against his skin. She studied him closely, expecting fear, maybe anger, but what she saw instead was calm resolve. Ryan's eyes were steady, defiant, and something in them made her uneasy in a way no warrior ever had. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of generations. "You are fortunate, human," she said softly. "Many would give their lives to stand before me." But his reply was quiet and sharp as a blade. "Then trade places with them." It wasn't just defiance, it was challenge. No one in her empire had ever spoken to her like that. For the first time, she didn't know how to respond. She turned away, pretending to admire the holographic skyline outside, but her hands trembled slightly. This man was nothing like the obedient specimens her scientists studied. When she looked at him again, she saw not weakness but dignity. She approached slowly, her gown whispering across the marble floor. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, and he smiled faintly. "Someone who's forgotten what it means to be free." The words struck her like a physical blow. She had expected a savage, not a philosopher. His tone carried no hatred, only truth. She ordered the guards to remove his restraints and escort him to her private quarters instead of the cells. When they hesitated, she cut them off. "He stays where I can see him." As the doors sealed behind them, silence fell. Lyriel walked closer, her golden eyes gleaming in the low light. "You think I'm your enemy," she said, her voice softening. "But I saved you from death. You should be grateful." Ryan tilted his head slightly. If life means being owned, maybe death isn't worse. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. No one had ever dared to speak to her in such words. Yet she couldn't summon anger. Instead, she felt curiosity. A dangerous, unfamiliar curiosity that made her chest tighten. Later that night, as the city lights flickered below and the twin moons reflected off the ocean beyond the palace, she stood by her balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere among them was his home, a world she had always dismissed as backward and chaotic. And yet, that same world had given birth to the only man who had ever made her question herself. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Calm, fearless, human. In the morning, she summoned no servants, no guards. She walked to his chamber instead. He was awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, studying the alien stars beyond his window. When she entered, he didn't rise or bow. He only said, "You can take me apart, princess, but you can't change what I am." His words lingered in the air like a promise. And though she was a ruler of 1,000 worlds, for the first time in her life, Princess Lyriel felt that she was the one standing in chains. Days passed inside the shimmering palace, and what began as captivity slowly turned into something neither of them could define. Princess Lyriel watched Ryan through hidden glances, curious about his silence, the way he carried himself with quiet pride despite being a prisoner. Most men in her empire groveled before her. They tried to impress her with flattery or gifts, but this human never tried to please her. He simply existed as if his spirit refused to be caged. She began to speak to him, first out of boredom, then fascination. She asked about Earth, its oceans, its cities, and he told her of a world full of color and chaos, of freedom earned through struggle. When she laughed softly at his crude descriptions, she realized it had been years since she'd laughed at all. Her attendants noticed the change. Her tone softened, her temper lessened, but they dared not mention it aloud. One evening, as dusk fell and the sky outside glowed violet beneath twin moons, Lyriel entered his chamber again. This time there were no guards at the door. Ryan stood near the window, watching the distant lights of Vereen below. "You could have escaped," she said quietly. "The guards are loyal to me, but even loyalty can be bribed." He turned to her with that same calm gaze. "If I ran," he said, "I'd only be another fugitive in your empire. But here, I can look at you and remind you that not everything bends to power." His words carried no threat, only truth, and it stung more deeply than any blade. She approached slowly, the faint perfume of her skin mixing with the cool night air. "You speak as if power means nothing to you," she whispered. "It doesn't," he said simply, "because real strength isn't about control. It's about choice." His words echoed in her mind long after he fell silent. Lyriel had grown up surrounded by courtiers, advisors, and soldiers who worshipped her name, but none of them had ever dared speak of choice. She had been raised to believe that emotion was weakness, that ruling required distance. Yet when Ryan looked at her, she felt stripped of her titles, her armor, her lies. She found herself returning to him every night, sometimes with questions about humanity, sometimes with silence. He told her stories of lovers who chose each other even when worlds stood between them, of a kind of affection that didn't demand submission. Those words burned in her chest, dangerous and forbidden, but she couldn't turn away. One night, while she watched him under the glow of starlight, she asked, "Why do you not hate me?" Ryan looked up at her, his face calm but his voice heavy. "Because hate is easy, pity is harder." She froze, unable to answer. His eyes softened then. "You're not a monster, princess. You're just lonely." The word broke something inside her. She wanted to deny it, but her voice faltered. No one had ever seen her so clearly. She sat beside him without thinking, her fingers brushing his hand for the briefest moment. It was the smallest touch, yet it felt like an electric storm. Neither spoke again, but the air between them changed. The silence was no longer cold. It was alive, trembling with something fragile and forbidden. That night she couldn't sleep again. As she stood by her balcony, the stars above seemed different, closer, brighter, restless. For the first time in her immortal life, Lyriel felt what her poets once called longing. It wasn't for power, for heirs, or for her throne. It was for the one creature in her palace who refused to kneel, and whose defiance had begun to awaken her heart. The next evening, the palace corridors were quiet, wrapped in the silver glow of the twin moons, and the scent of the Valoran night blossoms drifted through the air. Princess Lyriel walked alone toward the human's chamber, her heart unsteady in her chest. For days she had fought the pull he had on her, convincing herself that curiosity was not desire, that fascination was not affection. But she could no longer lie to herself. When she reached his door, she hesitated, her hand trembling before she finally pressed the control panel. The door slid open, revealing Ryan sitting beside the window, the stars reflected in his calm eyes. He didn't rise or bow, only looked at her quietly, as if he had expected her to come. "Can't sleep again, princess?" he said gently, and she found herself smiling before she realized it. She closed the door behind her, walking closer until only a few steps separated them. She told him of her curse that night, her voice low and fragile, how her ancestors' obsession with blood purity had doomed her body to weakness, how her council pressed her to produce an heir to preserve their power. "That's why you were chosen," she whispered. "You were supposed to save my line." Ryan listened without judgment, his expression softening. "You wanted my body, not my heart," he said quietly. "But maybe that's what you really needed." The words pierced deeper than any weapon. She sat beside him, the shimmering folds of her gown brushing against his bare arm, and she felt the warmth of his skin, real, alive, defiant. "You think I don't understand hearts?" she murmured. "No," he said softly. "I think you've never been allowed to have one." Silence filled the chamber, broken only by the hum of the palace systems and the soft pulse of starlight through the glass. Then she turned her face toward him, her golden eyes uncertain. "Do you fear me?" she asked. "No," he replied. I fear what they've turned you into. His voice held no accusation, only sorrow. And in that moment, Lyriel's strength cracked. She leaned closer, drawn to something she didn't yet understand. Her fingers brushed his cheek, tracing the faint scar along his jaw. Your skin is warm, she said softly, almost to herself. On my world, we are born cold. He looked at her, eyes steady, voice low. Then maybe you needed someone to remind you what warmth feels like. She didn't remember who moved first, but suddenly their faces were close, breaths mingling, the world outside fading into nothing. When their lips met, it wasn't royal command or conquest. It was surrender. A slow, trembling kiss that spoke of loneliness and rebellion, of two souls breaking every law written to keep them apart. When she pulled back, her eyes shimmered with something dangerous. Hope. If my council finds out, she whispered, they'll destroy you. He smiled faintly. They'll have to catch me first. Her heart twisted, torn between fear and desire, between duty and a feeling she could no longer deny. That night, for the first time, Princess Lyriel didn't dream of her throne or her empire. She dreamed of the human's arms around her, of a heartbeat that matched her own. And when dawn painted the alien sky gold, she realized the truth she had tried to bury. This was no longer about survival. It was love. And love, in her world, was the most dangerous rebellion of all. The dawn over Vereen came soft and golden, but the peace it brought was a fragile illusion. Princess Lyriel awoke in Ryan's arms, his warmth steady against the chill of the alien morning. For a fleeting moment, she forgot the world outside her chambers. The council, the empire, the bloodlines that had chained her since birth. But reality returned swiftly. The palace doors trembled with the sound of footsteps, sharp voices echoing in the distance. Her attendants had seen enough to know. The forbidden had become undeniable. As the royal seals broke open and council guards filled the halls, Lyriel rose from the bed, her body trembling but her eyes calm with newfound strength. Ryan started to speak, but she touched his lips and whispered, no matter what happens, don't regret last night. He nodded, and there was no fear in his face, only the same quiet defiance that had captivated her since the first moment they met. Within the hour, the great council of Vealora assembled in the crystal chamber, their forms gleaming beneath the twin suns. They accused her of treason, of defiling her royal blood, of risking the purity of their ancient line. Lyriel stood before them in her silver gown, crown set upon her head, every inch the ruler they had created. But when she spoke, her voice was no longer the voice of a puppet queen. You speak of purity as if it makes us strong, she said, her tone steady. But it has made us hollow. You speak of legacy as if it is sacred, but it is only fear passed from one generation to the next. And now, you fear him, because he reminds you of what you've lost. The chamber erupted in shouts and protests, her words echoing off the marble walls. The chancellor's voice thundered above the noise. The human must die. His presence is a stain upon our kind. The words ignited something fierce within her. Lyriel stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. If he dies, I abdicate. Today. Silence fell. No one moved. The counselors stared at her as though she had spoken blasphemy. You wouldn't dare, one hissed. You need us. She raised her chin. No, you need me. The old order trembled in that moment, shaken by the will of a woman they had thought they owned. But Lyriel knew the cost. She returned to her quarters where Ryan was being held, 2 guards stationed outside. She dismissed them with a gesture, locking the door behind her. Inside, Ryan stood waiting, his expression unreadable. They want me dead, he said quietly. She nodded. I know. Her voice cracked for the first time that day. If you stay, they'll kill you. You have to go. She reached for him, but he caught her hand. I won't leave you behind. Her throat tightened, tears threatening to fall. You don't understand. If they find you, they'll destroy everything. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. Then let them. I didn't fall in love with a throne. I fell in love with the woman who stood against it. The confession broke her composure completely. Her tears spilled as she pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "Then let us run before they take even this moment from us." They moved through the hidden corridors beneath the palace, the ancient tunnels long forgotten by the empire's builders. Alarm lights began to flash above as the council realized what was happening. Guards filled the streets, warships darkened the sky. But in that chaos, a single shuttle lifted off from the lower docks, silent and small against the rising sun. Inside, Lyriel and Ryan sat side by side, hands intertwined, hearts racing with the weight of everything they had defied. Below them, the city they once ruled shrank into a blur of light and shadow. Ahead of them stretched the unknown. For the first time in her life, Lyriel felt free and terrified and alive. She looked at him and whispered, "Where will we go?" Ryan smiled faintly. "Anywhere they can't find us." And as the stars opened before them, she realized freedom was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The stars stretched endlessly before them. A sea of silver fire reflected in the hull of the stolen shuttle as it drifted beyond the reach of the Valoran patrols. Princess Lyriel sat beside Ryan in silence, her fingers still trembling from the adrenaline of their escape. The hum of the ship was steady, and in that small sound she found something strangely comforting. For the first time in her life, there were no guards, no advisors, no crown pressing down on her head. Just the quiet rhythm of space and the steady warmth of the human beside her. Ryan glanced at her, a faint smile on his lips. "You still look like a queen," he said softly. She looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore. A queen doesn't run." He turned his hand over and took hers. "No," he said gently, "but a woman who fights for her own heart. That's something rarer than any throne." Days passed as they hid among the stars, moving from one forgotten system to another. Lyriel learned how to live without servants, how to cook simple meals, how to navigate the dark of space with her own hands. Each small act of survival felt like rebellion. Ryan would tease her gently, showing her how to fix the shuttle's panels, how to laugh without fear. At night, when the stars burned bright through the viewport, they'd sit close, sharing stories about Earth's oceans and Vealora's endless skies. She began to see the beauty in imperfection, the strength in simplicity. What once felt beneath her became precious. One evening, as the ship floated near a crimson nebula, she turned to him and said, "I used to believe love was duty, that it had to serve something greater. But with you, I understand. It's enough just to feel it." But the past was never far behind. The council had declared her a traitor, her throne claimed by those who sought to erase her memory. The royal fleet hunted the void, searching for the lost princess and her human lover. When the first warning signal blared through the shuttle, they both knew the chase was over. Valoran ships filled the horizon, their silver wings cutting through space like blades. Ryan took control of the ship, eyes calm even as alarms screamed. "We can't outrun them," he said, and Lyriel's heart sank. She looked at him, fear mixing with love. "Then we don't run." She stood beside him, activating the ship's communication beacon. Her voice filled the stars. "This is Lyriel of Vealora. You call me traitor, but I am more loyal to life than any of you have ever been. You fear what I've done because it reminds you that love cannot be bred or bought. It must be chosen." Her words echoed across the fleet, silencing even the most hardened commanders. Then the Valoran flagship opened fire. The blast struck the shuttle, sending it spinning through the void. Sparks filled the cabin as systems failed. Ryan threw himself over her, shielding her from the explosion. When the smoke cleared, the ship was dying. Alarms wailed softly, lights dimming one by one. Lyriel looked down at Ryan, his chest streaked with blood, his breath shallow. "Stay with me," she whispered, holding him tightly. He smiled faintly, his voice breaking. "You made me believe, princess, that even the coldest stars can burn again." Her tears fell onto his face, glowing faintly against his skin. She kissed his forehead, whispering, You were never mine to own, but my heart was always yours. He closed his eyes, the last of his breath mingling with hers. When the wreck drifted into the darkness, the Valoran ships hesitated. None dared approach. The story of the princess who defied an empire spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Some said she perished beside the human she loved. Others claimed their bodies were never found, that their shuttle slipped through a rift beyond known space. In the centuries that followed, explorers spoke of a distant world, lush and quiet, where two figures were seen walking hand in hand beneath twin moons. Whether myth or truth, one thing endured: the tale of an alien princess and a human who taught her that love was the greatest rebellion of all. If you enjoyed this story of forbidden love and defiance, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of passion, destiny, and the fire that unites hearts across galaxies. See you in the next story, right here on my channel.